Chapter 10. Moments later, Nikolai was in front of the warden's office. Although he was still standing, he was a sorry sight. His face was beginning to swell from the beating he had received to his head. One eye was turning black, his shirt was almost ripped off, and his hair was all covered with dirt and straw. "What's the meaning of this?" the warden demanded, coming out of his office. When he saw Nikolai, he began to walk round and round him. "He insists that he can't work today because it's some kind of holy day," snapped the guard. "A holy day, is it? Well, now, Yuri." The warden turned to the guard. "I see that you tried to enlighten this man on the ways of our camp. You are to be commended." By now Nikolai could hardly see through the eye that was swelling shut. He was indeed suffering from the decision he had made to keep God's Sabbath holy. But it didn't matter. This was a small price to pay compared to the suffering that Jesus had endured for Nikolai. What harm could it do to suffer a little for him? The warden turned back to Nikolai. "What have you got to say for yourself, troublemaker?" "It's true," Nikolai admitted. Although he could not see clearly, he stared straight ahead again, not looking directly at the warden. "Well, I hoped you'd learned your lesson." His voice sounded as smooth as syrup as he came to stand in front of Nikolai. But beneath it all, Nikolai sensed the man could be cruel. "Are you ready to go back to work?" He stood toe to toe with the prisoner, his nose barely inches from Nikolai's face. "It's God's holy day. I can't work on the seventh-day Sabbath." The warden's eyes grew steely cold. "You can't work?" he asked plainly. His voice strangely calm, but Nikolai could tell there was disdain beneath the calm exterior, and he sensed that the worst was yet to come. "Not on God's holy day. Is that your final answer?" "Yes, sir." "The consequences will be severe." The warden's voice was still even, but the tension was building. "It's my decision, sir. I'm willing to take the punishment." "And you will." The warden turned to Yuri with ice in his voice, and he had a cold gleam in his eye. "Go get my whip from my office. Strip the preacher to the waist and tie him to the flagpole. We'll see how strong this boy is." Nikolai was brave, but he found it difficult to keep from crying out in pain. The warden did indeed make a spectacle of Nikolai as he beat him mercilessly with the whip. Finally Nikolai slumped to the ground unconscious, and it was only then that the warden stopped long enough to catch his breath. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and handed the whip to Yuri. "Cut him loose. When he comes to, he can find his own way back to the barracks." And with that, the warden went back into his office. Yuri watched him go, not surprised, but a bit solemn at this display of the warden's fury. It had been a long time since he had seen the warden beat a prisoner like this, and it was a bit disturbing for him to see the warden enjoy it so. He found himself he himself had beaten Nikolai just minutes before, but now he realized what anger could do to someone if unchecked. It was a rather strange mixture of feelings, and he was hard pressed to explain the anger that he and the warden felt toward the prisoners. How long Nikolai lay on the ground he did not know. The sun was low in the sky when he finally came to, and he could hardly move. The blood had dried on his back, but the flies were having a feast. After a bit, he finally managed to stand and slowly stagger back to the barracks. When he got there, he collapsed on his bunk and fell into an exhausted sleep. The next day, his back felt like chopped meat, but he managed to get to his feet. He was able to wash the blood from his face, but he couldn't reach his back. His shirt covered the lacerations on his back, but his face was black and blue for all to see. and not surprisingly, the other prisoners avoided him. It was too risky to do otherwise. After all, who would want to befriend a foolish preacher who would rather be horsewhipped than give in to the warden's demands? Any one of them might be considered a sympathizer if they were caught talking to Nikolai. During the next few days, Nikolai grew stronger. The wounds healed slowly, but his courage grew with each day. He passed the test. He had been strong for Jesus. He had not given in, though he knew he would suffer for it. As the days passed, the other prisoners still avoided him, but he thought he saw faint looks of admiration directed toward him. Tuesday came and went, and then Wednesday and Thursday. Nikolai began to think of the coming Sabbath. What would be his fate? Would the warden respect him for his stand on the Sabbath? Would he grant him the privilege to rest as he had asked? Or would it be just the opposite? Would he get another beating for his decision to honor the Sabbath? Unfortunately, Nikolai couldn't see that worse was still to come, and it was just as well. He needed to grow a bit stronger before Satan's tide of evil would again hit him with all its force.